Okay, I'm going to try again to read some more out of the book Origins of the Gods by Andrew Collins and Gregory L. Little. The image that you're looking at is an actual photograph of the sky by a cat that went by the name Mr. Butterbud, believe it or not. And he filmed that in the sky. It's not artist rendering. He no longer has a YouTube channel. Either it was taken down or he took it down, one of the two. I never found out. Many of us who tell the truth end up having our channels taken down quite a bit. We never get popular. And I need to do this reeling. Hopefully it works, because I just got done doing a video about what happened, a little bit of what happened last Sunday, around 8 p.m. Eastern Time, above my house. What I believe is what's going on as far as these sad balloons coming down. Someone's figured out how to have these things come down. There are hundreds of thousands of them out there. In the upper atmosphere, that's where all those satellites are. They're not in deep space. It would not be practical even to do that. It's much more practical to have it in a higher altitude where they have stationary air that doesn't move. There's no movement of air. And minimum at best. They have balloon technology that lasts. They can stay up there in the upper atmosphere for decades, they say now. That's most. If we apply Occam's razor, that's the most logical thing that's going on. You know, there's a lot of deception in this world. And Lord of all spirits, Heavenly Father, if I'm part of it, please forgive me. I don't want to be. Anyways, we'll finish up this. Getting into this Shawnee Cistus Massum ceremony. Now we're at the source of supernatural beings. In his 1914 book, Myth of the North American Indians, Lewis Spence related that Native Americans had two different concepts of the supernatural. That's misleading, but there is a useful bit of information within Spence's assertions. Spence states that they had a country of the ghost and a land of the supernatural people. The country of the ghost was supposedly the destination of human beings after death, while the land of the supernatural people was, quote, the dwelling place of a supernatural race some degrees higher than mankind, end quote. The concepts of ghosts and the destination of the dead are very complicated, and there are a few drastic differences between tribes that were separated in origin and heredity. The true beliefs about the fate of the dead were only revealed and widely known in anthropological circles in the late 1990s to mid-2000s. It is clear that the deepest Native American beliefs about death were concealed from Spence and others. The supernatural people, however, came from three very different but interconnected places. Supernatural powers and entities were attached to the upper, lower, and middle worlds. They were all created at the beginning of time, at the moment of creation. The earth spirit forces, those attached to the physical earth space, interact with us on earth, and the powers of the upper and lower worlds occasionally impinge on our physical reality, essentially fulfilling their roles. The idea of a role, in quotes, being fulfilled by various spiritual entities can be understood by comparing it to the idea of an angel. Traditionally, an angel has a very specific role to perform. It is a messenger. Sometimes the message requires an action to be performed. At other times, it requires an appearance to a particular person to whom the message is delivered. In the same manner, all spiritual entities in Native American lore have a role. They are all actors fulfilling their roles. You never get to see what is really behind the masks they wear. That is one reason some tribes performed sacred ceremonies wearing masks, sometimes called clowns, but not in the common meaning, or dressed as animals or had painted faces and bodies, revealing that which was behind the mask was forbidden. The trickster also plays a role and is like an actor in a play. The little people also have a function. They fulfill a role, but they were all real entities. Iroquois tribes, for example, saw the little people as a race of spiritual pygmies who are associated with certain landforms. The Cherokee, distant cousins of the Iroquois, also viewed the little people as physical manifested beings who could be either helpful or malignant. Shamans and medicine men and women had the ability to interact with all three spiritual realms. In fact, it was required that these holy people interact with the spiritual realm, but all of these ideas go far, far deeper. Ultimately, they are about the meaning of life. We're now on part 1, section 6. Ancient answers to eternal questions. In the second part of this book, Andrew Collins will discuss other regions and cultures of the ancient world. However, there are good reasons for the focus here in the first part on what Native Americans believed about nature and the paranormal. Perhaps the most important reason is that it is widely thought that Native American beliefs are the closest we can ever get to how the ancients truly conceptualized reality. In Indian Medicine Power, Brad Steiger writes, quote, "It may be seen that due to their hundreds of years of isolation from both East and West, the American Indians may have preserved the essentials of the ancient mysteries in their purest form." End of quote. But it is inappropriate to describe the beliefs and cultural traditions of the ancient Native Americans as if they were all the same. The Historical Atlas of Native Americans lists 46 Algonquin tribes as being present in North America from 1580 to 1880, along with 310 other tribes. The U.S. Federal Register today recognizes nearly 600 different tribes within the United States, but many of them are localized political groups in a specific geographic area. There are likely around 30 somewhat different tribal cultures, but even among them, there are many smaller tribal groups that split off from the larger group of their ancestors. Yet they retain the basic beliefs of their group of origin. In reality, there are probably only 3 to 5 somewhat different cultural belief systems. However, they all share some major commonalities. In this chapter, we will look at the commonalities. In Chapter 5, an 1896 quote about Native Americans was cited. Quote, "Nature to the heathen is not harmonious whole swayed by internal principles, but a chaos of causeless effects, the meaningless play of capricious ghosts." End quote. Nothing could be further from the truth. In reality, the underlying beliefs of Native Americans were and still are the exact opposite of that statement. Over time, archaeologists and anthropologists began to better understand how these ancient people viewed the world. In his classic book, The Southeastern Indians, archaeologist Charles Hudson related, quote, "If there is a single word which epitomizes the Southeastern Indian belief system, it is order." End quote. The same word, order, accurately describes the key belief of the Algonquin speaking tribes of the Northeast and the Great Plains, as well as the Southwestern tribes. Order, balance, and harmony in nature are the keys to understanding how they view the universe and their place in it. Events were not causeless or capricious in this belief system. Supernatural events, the appearance of strange beings, and the lights in the sky were all part of the natural order. These ancient people developed their own theory of natural science that was expressed in ways that ethnographers and anthropologists describe as, quote, religious or magical, end quote. In sum, the mound builders and the people of other Native American cultures developed a deep belief system that attempted to answer the eternal questions our evolutionary ancestors have probably been asking for at least the past million years. Who am I? Why am I here? Where did I come from? Where am I going? The most closely guarded shamanic secrets answered all of them. And I question that million years thing, but whatever. Commonplace myths and sacred knowledge. Mythologist George Lakeford has written that many of the myths and tales we read in most books on Native American legends were composed for children. Lakeford refers to such stories as commonplace myths, and they don't reveal the deeper core of the Native Americans' beliefs. And on the other hand, there was a second category of beliefs Lakeford referred to as sacred knowledge. This chapter focuses on the sacred knowledge, which gave the deeper answers. The sacred knowledge and the spiritual truths were held as closely guarded secrets by a select group of men and women who were directly tasked with controlling the life and death cycle of the tribe through periodic rituals. The same can be said for their knowledge of medical plants and healing procedures. The transmission of the secret knowledge from one generation to the next was done primarily through hereditary lines. The information was passed along verbally, with elders giving explanations of sacred objects, symbols, and rituals. The concealing of the sacred knowledge was also a way the elite could maintain their power. It may sound cryptic, but it isn't. We do the same today in medicine, science, politics, and religion. Each area has its own terminology, codes, symbols, secrets, and its practitioners guard its information from outsiders. Today we have paywalls and membership requirements to many scientific organizations that restrict scientific research information from the masses. And virtually all of our most effective medications require a prescription from one of our social elites. The shamanic creation story. In Chapter 5, the Shane Masum ceremony was briefly described. It's important to remember that the belief underlying the Masum were ultimately derived from Siberian shamanistic practices that were at least 12,000 years old. But it is now known that the shamanistic practices and beliefs go much further back in time, as Andrew Collins shall show in Part 2. An understanding of the ancient Native Americans' beliefs and ideas about the paranormal and the purpose of life and nature begins with their concepts of the acts of creation. In essence, the shamanic creation story reveals the origin of the gods as these ancient cultures conceptualized it. Schlesinger? I cannot pronounce that guy's name. I probably am, but I'm not confident about it. Schlesinger related that the Sistis creation story began with a singularity. The singularity that existed before creation was, according to this account, a single point of pure spiritual energy. Virtually all tribes simply refer to it as spirit, using the particular word in their language that gives that underlying idea. Many historic and modern tribes commonly refer to it as the Great Spirit. It was a pure energy that always existed. It was a type of primordial consciousness that defies our understanding. In modern physics, it is also referred to as a singularity, the only thing that existed before the supposed Big Bang. This science-based singularity also defies our understanding. Even the Zuni, considered to be the most ancient of the Puebloan people, had a similar concept. Their creation story tells of a single container of all that existed before creation, that thought outward in space, thereby bringing the physical world into existence for its own purposes, which are incomprehensible to us. The singularity began churning within itself. It instantly evolved into two opposite equal parts. This two-part singularity can be symbolized by the traditional yin-yang symbol. It is, of course, a contradiction in terms, and its occurrence led to the act of creation. In belief, the moment that the two opposing portions of energy formed, the singularity was no longer that. That imbalance caused the instantaneous creation of everything. The Big Bang, as modern physics calls it, and the act of creation by the Great Spirit occurred as a way to maintain harmony while allowing the two opposing spiritual energies to exist. The three-part universe. When the swirling singularity instantly separated itself, the Big Bang, and it created, a three-part universe that was divided into an upper world, a lower world, and a middle world. The middle world is the physical world. To explain the created universe to the masses, Native American iconography depicted a three-part sphere, with the physical earth suspended in the middle. Above the earth was the upper world. Below was the lower world. The upper world contained one of the two forces that had divided the singularity, and the lower world contained the other. Thus, the physical world was positioned between these two great spiritual forces. There are a host of children's myths that mention how the three worlds were created and connected together in a way the masses could comprehend. As Lakeford related, these were children's stories and the sacred knowledge was concealed. Here is one of the deepest secrets in this cosmology. When the spiritual singularity was split into two spiritual portions, the middle world appeared between them as a third-dimensional double reflection. The middle world represents a three-dimensional mirror on which the two opposing spiritual forces can interact and play out their intended purposes. The physical world is the interaction space for an ongoing spiritual cycle. In a literal sense, the earth was seen as a physical field allowing the interplay between the spiritual forces of the upper and the lower worlds. The physical world was created as a place where the two opposing forces could each exist, express their spiritual essence, and remain in balance. There you go. The three parts of the Native American cosmos. I don't know if I want to take a picture of that or not, but it makes sense to me, and I've been visualizing this of late. Think of a sphere, like the balloons that are flowing in the sky right now. A sphere like that, and in the middle of this sphere is a plane with the bottom and the top. So top and the bottom. The top having the earth. The sphere itself, half of it is full of water, and then the earth is on top of it. The earth, the land. And then the upper half, it's the atmosphere. And then there is actually still a north and south pole that runs through the very top of the sphere to the very bottom of the sphere. Then imagine, what do they call that? It's not a vortex. What do they call that? Not over camera. It looks like a donut shape, right? I was visualizing that myself. So I wasn't alone with that. That's something that they believed in for how many thousands of years, allegedly? Who knows? The two opposing forces, creation and entropy. Entropy. That's what it is. Entropy. Native Americans observed the daily the daily rhythms, cycles, and frequent chaos of nature. They came to understand the cycles of life and death, aging, the growing seasons, weather, the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, and the many conflicts encountered in life. All these cycles and events were explained by invoking the interplay between the two spiritual forces, order and disorder. They were the spirit of creation, order from the upper world, and the spirit of entropy, disorder from the lower world. Creation always produces order by taking substances and linking them together into an organized whole. Creation also seemingly makes predictable cycles such as the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. They all appear to be in harmony. On the other hand, entropy produces disorder by methodically disturbing that which has been created. Unpredictable weather and untimely illness, plague, a sudden death, or an invasion by unfriendly people are all part of the spirit of entropy or disorder. Not that I have chosen to use the term entropy rather than chaos, because it better describes how disorder or chaos occurs. The process of entropy is a universal truth in physics. Everything gradually falls apart. Everything eventually breaks down and degrades back into its most primordial state. Social systems and all relationships gradually fall apart because of entropy. In short, all things change, but entropy allows for a new creation. It is part of the great cycle. A great reset, huh? The forces of nature as spiritual manifestations. One way to understand the myriad of paranormal experiences reported in Native American mythology is that that on Earth there is a constant interplay between the spiritual forces of the upper and lower worlds. It is like Jung's opposing archetypes, where one force is seeking to create order and the other disorder. These two opposing archetypes can assume different guises and shapes. According to this idea, it is the interplay of these spiritual forces that creates the wide range of paranormal phenomena. In this ideology, the creator of the sky, eagles, hawks, swans, and such, represented real spiritual powers from the upper world. Did I say creators? I meant to say creatures of the sky. That was really dumb of me. In this ideology, the creatures of the sky, eagles, hawks, swans, and such, represent real spiritual powers from the upper world. Creatures that lived underground or underwater represented powers from the lower world. Creatures that lived on the earth were powers linked to the middle world. But everything was imbued with spiritual energy, an energy that was in a never-ending cycle between the two great forces of creation and entropy. In this view, the entire universe was placed in a sort of balanced opposition between those two great forces. The upper world also had major spiritual powers that appeared in predictable cycles. The sun and the moon. It is usually assumed that the sun is the male deity and the moon is the female, but that isn't the case. Some tribes saw the sun and moon as male or female depending on their commonplace myths. However, the sun and the moon were not worshipped in the sense usually attributed to the beliefs. It was the spiritual power behind them that was honored. The lower world also had a major spiritual being. It was a giant snake that would hover along the horizon at night during certain times of the year. When it flew to the sky, it took wings and was the constellation of Scorpius. Everything in the universe, everything in the physical world, was composed of some primordial spiritual energy from the singularity that existed at the beginning. Modern physics tells us the same thing using different terminology. We are all made of stars. Thus, this primordial spirit exists in all physical objects and in all living things. Spirit is the underlying composition of everything. Rocks were seen as solidified spirit. Water was flowing spiritual energy. Fire was the release of spiritual energy and was related to the sun. Crystals were viewed as a purified and dense form of spiritual energy. Dirt was the most primordial form of spirit in the physical world. All these physical forms of spirit were used by shamans and medicine people to commune with the spiritual realm and even manipulate it. Landforms, rock formations, caves, earthworks, mounds, and water could all be arranged in ways that allowed for an interaction with the spiritual powers from both the upper and lower worlds. Carefully shaped landforms were created as sacred enclosures for the earth spirits to emerge. Crystals were used for making contact with the spiritual forces, and various plants were used in the ritual performed to achieve harmony and balance. All these spiritual objects could become physical points of contact where humans were able to directly interact with specific spiritual forces if the earth, rocks, and water were arranged in specific ways that shamans and medicine people dictated. In addition, certain locations were known to be special points where the three worlds interconnected in a unique way. Many people today might refer to these points as portal or window areas. Portals and windows are places where spiritual forces emerge routinely. Such locations are epicenters for the interactions between two primary spiritual forces, creation and entropy, where humans can be both witnesses and participants. It is the manifestation and interaction of the spiritual energy that created the entire myriad of events that we today refer to as paranormal phenomena. Lights in the sky, translucent beings, strange creatures, voices from nowhere, visitors from the sky, apparitional manifestations, and so much more. Embedded within the ultimate spiritual reality of everything was an innate drive to manifest the peculiar essence of its underlying nature. This is whatever form a spiritual force took reflected its underlying nature. Upper world powers reflected creation, lower world powers reflected entropy. The middle world forces were the earth spirits that both helped and hindered and tricked humans. That is, they could manifest both creation and disorder. The powers of all three worlds emerged on the physical earth routinely in a sort of dance of opposites. Because they had to do so, thus spiritual manifestations appeared everywhere in nature in the guise of paranormal phenomena and appearances of the little people, tricksters, and a vast myriad of other beings, including various animals. These spiritual forces were depicted symbolically in many ways on sacred artifacts, and rituals and celebrations were developed to commune with them. Everything in the universe was a manifestation of spiritual energy. This belief is the spiritual nature of all that existed was interpreted by early ethnographers and European priests as animism, the idea that everything is alive. But in the Native American belief system, the spirit that inhabited every bit of matter was a sacred, holy part of the whole. It has a far deeper meaning than animism. Native Americans believe that there is purpose and meaning for all things. In the Native American belief, everything is connected because it is part of the whole. One very large difference between Native American cultural beliefs and European beliefs relates to this idea. Europeans essentially viewed nature as something to be exploited and used as humans saw fit. Animals, trees, minerals, water, land were here for humans to use as resources. Native Americans, however, saw nature as something to harmonize with, preserve, share, and nurture. In Native American beliefs, if nature was mistreated, it would strike back. Imagine that's the truth, and imagine it's about ready to happen again. Well, imagine. These two spiritual forces of creation and entropy explained the great cycle of life and death, as well as virtually all other events observed in the natural world. The creation of the physical universe was a means for the primordial spirit to allow the two forces of creation and entropy to exist, but to also remain in balance. Sent to the middle of this interplay between these two great forces were humans. The role of humans. There are many indigenous children's stories explaining the entry of humans into the physical world, but most of them don't specifically relate the role of humans and their purpose. These tales vary considerably among tribal mythology. As mentioned previously, children's stories were ultimately about teaching skills, morals, and right and wrong. The deeper purpose of why humans were created and sent to this world was to maintain balance. Humans are tasked with maintaining harmony between the two major spiritual forces. This is true in the Algonquin tribes, the Navajos, and virtually all of the southeastern tribes. It is also true of the Hopi and the Zuni. There is acceptance in the mainstream archaeological community that the ancient mound building cultures centered their spirituality on this idea of maintaining a balance between these two opposing forces. In general, it can be said that nearly all Native American rituals and healing methods were related to maintaining and regaining harmony. Humans were special in that they could appreciate and comprehend the two primary spiritual forces, and humans were given freedom of choice. The Massums ceremony and many other seasonal celebrations were about maintaining a balance in nature and harmonizing with the spiritual forces interacting with us. Embedded within the Native American belief system was that land could not be owned. Land could be used and lived on. It could be altered for spiritual and other purposes that supported maintaining balance and harmony, but it couldn't truly be owned by individuals. It was simply inhabited. All of nature had to be respected. Nothing could be killed without good reason. Everything had to be honored. The underlying reason was simple. Everything is connected and composed of the same primordial spirit. Disturbing one part of the interconnected web of life disturbed it all. And that's the end of part 6. Or I should say section 6 of part 1 of The Origins of the Gods by Andrew Collins and Gregory Little. Actually, we're reading Gregory Little's words. Good stuff, my book.